How about that? Okay, good afternoon and welcome to a special workshop meeting of the Oak Harbor City Council. Today is Wednesday, October 28th. It is 2 p.m. We have a quorum and I'll call this City Council workshop to order at this time. Councilmember Wassinger has let us know that she will be absent from today's meeting. Due to COVID-19, there is no physical meeting location for Washington Proclamation 20-28. Today's meeting may be viewed live via YouTube. In addition, to listen to the live meeting, the public may call 623-404-9000 and enter the meeting ID number, and that number is 149-766-1467, and this is for audio only. Public comment is not normally taken at a workshop meeting, so council members and city staff are participating via teleconference for the most part. We have a few in here, but the staff sitting in city council chambers are all physically distanced at least 6 feet apart and will be wearing masks when they are not speaking. Guests that are included in staff presentations will be excused from the Ring Central meeting at the conclusion of the agenda item as appropriate. I want to thank the public, the City Council, and staff for working with us as we continue to adapt to the requirements related to COVID-19. More details about COVID-19 and its impacts on city services can be found at our website at www.oakharbor.org. And we do have 3 action items on our agenda this afternoon, so I would like our city clerk to call roll for the council members that are here with us. Julie?
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Pro Tem Munns.
Here.
Councilmember Heisen.
Present.
Councilmember Mack.
Present.
Councilmember Servadius.
Present.
Councilmember Wiesner.
Present.
Councilmember Goebel.
Present.
Thank you, Mayor. We have 6 in attendance.
Okay, great. So I'd like to proceed then at this time to the action items. Jim Bridges, City Engineer, will present item A, action item approval of easement with U.S. Navy for groundwater extraction system. Jim? Oh,
hi, Mayor. Yeah, actually, I had talked to Anna earlier. She was going to present that. I wasn't aware that was on the agenda today. So,
oh, I'm sorry. Okay. So
from my point, we have completed the review of the plans and they have been approved by my department. So,
okay, then I'll turn to Anna. Anna?
Thank you.
Hi, Mayor. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
So, as you're aware, the Navy's been working to recover pollutants from the groundwater. The Navy has requested that the city enter into an easement with them on State Route 20 right-of-way so they can install their GETR system, groundwater extraction, treatment, and recovery system. And so at the September 23rd meeting, you guys will remember that we brought this issue forward, but it was just so that we could get a purchase and sales agreement signed so that the Navy's funding could be obligated for this upcoming project. You guys there? I had a glitch, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Sorry about that, Anna.
Sorry about that. I'm going to stop video. Perhaps it's a bandwidth issue with the video. How's that?
Oh, can't see anything.
Yeah, I stopped the video for bandwidth purposes. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great. So anyway, we've finally been able to work out the details of the easement. And so we're now recommending that council authorize the mayor to sign this easement granting the Navy the easement on State Route 20 right-of-way to install, operate, maintain wells, pipes, vaults, and associated appurtenance of a groundwater extraction, treatment, and recovery system. And if you guys have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer.
So I'll turn first to Julie. Do we have any input from anybody in the public? No public input about this? Okay. So council, you have questions about this? I think you've seen this before. Councilor Servadius. Oh. Can you hear me? Can't hear me. He can't hear me. Can anybody hear me?
There we go. My question is, we're all globally muted here, so we couldn't chime in if we wanted to.
Okay.
I don't have any questions. I just wanted to fix that issue. Hopefully whoever is the host can just individually mute people if they're getting feedback. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll fix that issue. I guess we're in the process, yes, okay. So we're looking for council questions or input or motions. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm ready to make a motion. It didn't seem to be any questions unless I'm wrong.
I'm not
I
seeing
move
any.
to authorize the mayor to sign the easement granting of the U.S. Navy within State Route 20 right-of-way and the right to install, operate, and maintain wells, pipes, vaults, and associated apparatus of groundwater extraction, treatment, and recovery GETR system.
Second.
So we've got a motion and a second that reads exactly like the recommended action in the packet. Any other input or questions? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye, or raise your hands. Okay, that passes unanimously, 6, and that would be no room for nays then. Thank you, council, and thank you for your patience here. We will move on then to action item B. Approve amendment number 1 to right of entry agreement for Oak Harbor Youth Sailing Storage Shed. And I think that Anna is again going to take this. Anna?
Yes, sir, I'm ready. As you all see, we have, consistent with the parties' mutual interest to move the storage building from storage building 3 to across from storage building 4. We have prepared an amended right of entry agreement. This would be amending the right of entry that we council approved in December of 2019. We've got the amended right of way agreement here. However, we are still waiting on getting a copy of the Navy's approval letter. Basically, that it's just sort of a technicality that we have to have that goes along with the Navy's easement. So from our sources, the letter is in transit. We just still haven't received it yet. I think they actually shipped it off before scanning a copy and emailing it. So at this time, we actually cannot ask council to approve the amendment yet, since we're still waiting on the Navy's letter approving erection of the shed. So once we do get that letter, we will add that to the earliest council meeting as possible so that we can get this item approved and move forward.
I'm sorry, isn't there any other choice or an emergency meeting or something? Because now you've put it off to November, and if they need to secure a date to have it installed, you are possibly putting it into December now. Isn't there any other choice that we could do this to approve it? And we know the letter has been signed because I know Youth Sailing, having someone live in my house, received word from Captain Arney that he signed it and it was coming to the city.
Looks like Grant Weed's got his hand up here. Grant?
If I might just assist with fielding Councilmember Munn's question. One other option that might be available to council is to conditionally approve the right of entry. The thing that is important to know is what conditions the Navy may put on giving the approval and the authorization to use that part of the property that it has an easement over. So if council wanted to forego having this brought back again once we have the letter in hand, I suppose a motion that could be considered is a motion to authorize entry into the right of entry agreement, subject to review and approval of the Navy's letters and the conditions as are acceptable to the city attorney or to the mayor, whichever you prefer. That would avoid one additional stop back to council, but I do think it's important to know to get that letter and find out what conditions, if any, they're going to impose, because those will also be imposed on the youth sailing group.
So I think the first counselor with their hand up is Counselor Heisen.
Thank you, Mayor. That was going to be my suggestion, that council go ahead and approve this pending the receipt of the signed letter and the conditions. And then that way it could be approved immediately upon receipt instead of holding it off to another meeting. I would be comfortable doing that and leaving it up to, Anna's judgment in terms of the conditions or contents. That's all.
Whoops, Counselor Servadius. I'm sorry. I think I was on mute.
Thank you. Similar, I couldn't concur more with Councilmember Heisen, Councilmember Munns. Do we normally wait on hard copy original signatures? I mean, I think of all of the transactions we've done over the years, and maybe we do, and I just didn't know that, but it seems like in this world that a signed, scanned copy would suffice. And you're saying, Anna, Ms. Thompson, that there's not a digital version of this anywhere?
Exactly. I had tried to get a copy from Brian, but before it went out in the mail, and he wasn't able to catch admin in time. Yeah, no, that was my thoughts exactly, Councilmember Servadius, was that we just get a copy, throw it in agendas, it's good to go, and then, you get the hard copy 5 days later and it's totally fine. But yeah, there was just the trouble of getting that copy before admin mailed it out, and it just didn't happen, unfortunately. So it's I've literally been checking probably multiple times a day, and it's just not here yet, still in the mail.
Did Mr. Tiehouse have a copy?
He did not.
What? Just a moment. Let me finish my question.
Yes, sir. Sorry.
Somebody had to create the document, probably in Word. That document, an unsigned version, doesn't exist somewhere.
Yeah, I asked Brian, and he said that the copy that he started from had probably gone through several revisions, and he couldn't trust its sort, that it had been completed, that had been changed.
So I guess I was thinking along the lines of Mr. Weed's comments and what Councilmember Heisen recommended, that we just approve this subject to.
Absolutely.
But I guess I'm just there's a copy out there somewhere. Somebody had to finish it, put it in front of Captain Arnie, and Captain Arnie signed it. So I don't know. I guess I would turn back, Mr. Weed, if you wanted to try and express that language again, myself, or I don't know, anyone else. Well, I'm willing to take a whack at it to try and buy back some steps here, and not let these poor folks that use sailing linger for another 30 days. But yeah, Mr. Weed, if you wanted to weigh in, I don't if there's a way to make that concise. I know that you said that, and I was trying to process that.
Sure, I'd be glad to, Councilmember Servadius. A motion that could be considered would be motion to authorize entry into the or execution of the right of entry agreement with youth sailing, subject to review and approval of the contents and any conditions imposed by the U.S. Navy. And you can make it subject to city attorney approval or subject to mayor approval, whichever you would prefer.
All right, thank you. I'll yield to my other council members, but I'm happy to take a whack at that if we get there.
I see them shaking their heads, yes. I don't see any more hands up, so I think they're going to rely on you to take a whack at it, Mr. Servadius.
Thank you. So I move to authorize the mayor to execute the right of entry agreement for Oak Harbor Youth Sailing, subject to approval of the Navy's agreement by our city attorney.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Would anyone like for that to be reread? Did you get the motion, Julie? Okay. So motion by Councilor Servadius, second by Councilor Heisen. Seeing no more questions, all in favor, raise your hand. And that passes 6-0. Okay. Thank you for that, and we will then next move on to our last action item of the day, professional services agreement, Zencity Technologies for community engagement analysis using CARES funds. And I think that we have Sabrina Combs to present that. Sabrina?
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, Council, good afternoon. I'm going to introduce Jonathan from Zencity. This is an opportunity in the last couple of weeks as we worked on several projects. We've talked about being able to get improved understanding of how the community felt, their sentiments and engagement, and this tool should address that. So I'm going to turn it over to Jonathan from Zencity and let him go through the presentation. Jonathan?
Excellent. Thank you, Sabrina, and good afternoon, Mayor and City Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Jonathan Schaefer, and I oversee city partnerships here at Zencity. In brief, Zencity is a government-exclusive solution partner to local municipalities in the US. Today, we work with about 175 local cities and counties. Next slide, Sabrina, if possible. Our primary mission is to help you best understand your silent majority resident base. So Zencity partners with city senior leadership groups to save you significant time and resources to best understand your silent majority residents, the ones who are less likely to attend town hall meetings, fill out surveys, phone-a-thons, you name it. Next slide. As mentioned, we work with about 175 local municipalities. Specifically in Washington, we are working with the cities of Camas, Spokane, Renton, and Pasco. And because of our unique product offering to help cities address the public health emergency in relation to COVID-19, we have been considered as an eligible expense under the CARES Act. Next slide. Oh, next slide, one more. Yes, so we have 4 primary goals or 4 primary challenges that we look to solve as part of our partnership with each city. The first, as mentioned, is to help you tap into your silent majority resident base. But beyond that, we're also here to help you identify where your residents are most likely going to be engaging on content and sharing and engaging with their fellow residents in all publicly available sources. So by doing this, we're able to help you quickly, succinctly, and in a very short period of time, identify misinformation if it might be taking place within your community. And as we know, within 2020 for COVID-19, misinformation around about certain initiatives can certainly take place. But then more importantly, cities are tending to leverage Zencity to improve their messaging and storytelling to making sure that the right message is hitting the right resident group as we move forward to connect with our resident base. And And our fourth goal is to provide you with weekly insights and monthly reports, specifically to council, so that you can get a real-time feel as to what your community is feeling about certain initiatives as we move forward. Next slide. How does it all work? So Zencity connects, aggregates all publicly available discourse that's taking place within your community and bring it all into one house. This is a combination of a few things that you're probably familiar with already, which is your Facebook channels, your Twitter feeds, 311 or 211 if OCABA has. But then a vast majority of the discourse that takes place within your community actually takes place in channels that aren't necessarily owned by you today. So this would be local media, print, social media, print media, Facebook groups, Twitter handles, anything that's taking place in the publicly available sphere. Zencity connects, synthesizes it, aggregates it, and then performs AI and machine learning to break this resonant discourse down into topics and projects that make sense for you to have a really quick, really good understanding of what your residents are discussing and how they feel about those issues as well. And then, of course, we produce weekly insights and monthly reports on topics and projects that make sense for you to have a very clear-cut overview as to what you should be doing in relation to your resident discourse. Next slide. Specifically in relation to COVID-19, Zencity has customized its entire product offering so that you as the city, the senior leadership team within a city, can understand all the important initiatives that it's taking place. Whether that's just a high-level overview as to what your residents are discussing from a mapping point of view or from a sentiment point of view, but you can get really granular, how your residents are feeling about a mask mandate, how your residents are feeling about going back to school, reopening the economy, or future events that might be coming up, vaccine-related discourse, or even as something as granular as social distancing for Halloween celebrations this weekend. Zencity is able to give you real-time feedback as to what your residents are talking about on publicly available channels on all things related to COVID. Next slide. Just to give you a bit of a sense, beyond giving you very high-level information, each city user within the city senior leadership team can create their own projects to get you very customized data as to what residents are discussing on publicly available areas, whether that be for COVID-19 matters like confirmed cases, masks, hospitals, you name it, but then beyond COVID-19, how residents are responding to extreme weather discourse, or budget or elections or voting or you name it, e-scooters. And I can only imagine, as I've been reading the news the last couple of days, that even just from an extreme weather discourse, residents might be misinterpreting extreme weather that might be taking place in Alaska and be asking all interesting questions. And Zencity is here to help you decipher that noise and making sure that you get the right message out there in the quickest period of time. The next handful of slides just go through a handful of different examples as to what type of insights we'd actually be producing for you on a weekly basis. And once again, these can be on issues that make sense for you. How residents are responding to a mandate, how many are in favor, how many against it, what the source of positivity is from, where they're sharing this information, how certain community groups might be feeling about COVID restrictions. And then of course, the slide that we're looking at right now is your ability to benchmark OCABA against other Zen cities that are partners with us, whether it be other cities within Washington, other cities of similar size, and helping you quickly understand areas that you're exceeding the benchmark and where residents are actually commenting and discussing issues more than particular other cities. The primary goal, if I could summarize, is to save you guys significant time is to understand how your residents feel and help you make much more impactful, accurate decisions as to what your residents are discussing in real time. Thank you very much. I could always go on for another hour, but respectful of the council's time, please feel free to ask any questions along the way.
Thank you, Jonathan. So that's the presentation. The goal was to find a tool that would assist us in making sure that we were understanding what the community is talking about. In the last couple of months, we've had rallies, we've had masking policies, we've had a tsunami warning recently that went out regarding Alaska that community members, I received calls, other people received calls, were concerned about. And so it's just providing us with the alerts and the data behind the scenes so that we have a better idea. So for the utilities rate adjustment projects like that, we would have more informed information that I could present to council on a regular basis. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sabrina. Julie, any input from our public on this item? Okay, so we'll turn to our council and start with Mayor Pro Tem Munns.
Thank you, Mayor. Sabrina, I know our society has moved towards the social media stuff, but I still think because of what I perceive, and I could be way off, age of our population, that there still is a big group we would be missing. Now, for the tsunami warning that came out and some of those, it's impossible. But is there a way also to try to bring in the other, I'm guessing they may be older or they can't afford a cell phone, to bring them into being sure that they also have a chance to be informed and to take place with a survey?
Mayor Pro Tem, I think the really exciting thing about this tool is that it allows us to identify what people are talking about. And if we're seeing that there's a missing targeting audience like you're talking about, we would be able to target them more differently. So for instance, with some of the recent communications we've been doing about the Harbor Heights land use and other things, we've added items like postcards, but this would just allow us to understand some of the sentiment that's out there. One of my major concerns is there are multiple social media pages out there devoted to our communities, and it's very difficult to garner what the communication strategy is or how people feel about something, and this would allow us to get a better sense. One of my major concerns as your communication person is that I hear a lot of somebody told me or this person said, but what's the general consensus in the community? And this would allow us to see that, identify who that group is, and then from that data, we'd know who we were missing information from, and I could target them more proactively in a better way.
That sounds really, really good. But one concern, can someone or a group hijack this? Because if they realize it, they could flood an area to get what they want. Do you see what I'm talking about? Like right now with the voting, every which way I turn, I'm getting, oh, don't you know this candidate lies? And it's like, okay, enough is enough. So can this program kind of sense if someone is flooding it so that isn't the right information?
I'm going to let Jonathan talk about that.
Sure. Thank you for the question. It's an excellent question. So one of the values of Zencity is, in layman's terms, we call it a troll patrol. When we are able to recognize when numerous posts are coming from the same user or from the same account on the same page or even across multiple channels, we're able to filter that out to only represent one voice rather than a complete flood of a particular discussion point.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. We'll turn now to Councillor Wiesner.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I have some general concerns. I guess it's from the fiscal side, and I realize where these funds are coming from, but the reality is we're a pretty small town. We're not renting, and the reality is each of us have phone numbers. Publicly, it's my personal cell phone number that I publish, and I love public input, and I want public input, and the fear I guess I've got is the folks that are somewhat vocal, and we know we've got folks that often post and put information out there. The reality is most of those folks aren't afraid to come tell us what they think. The ones that are out there posting on social media, the ones that are out there writing letters to the editor, the ones that are doing their Twitters, often aren't afraid to speak up. It's the folks that aren't out there making those posts and the folks who aren't out there communicating, I guess, that I really want to hear from. The folks that maybe feel as though we are unapproachable, right? And I love the idea of garnering up information. But I'm just thinking, money wise, right? How far could that money go towards a campaign, with a comment and an input that the public feels more safer with, that maybe we would garner input from folks who aren't the normal folk that we hear from that aren't afraid to speak up, right? Because I guess what I'm saying is I really want to hear from that silent majority, not the nosy minority, right? Those folks I'm already talking to, and I think I have a feel for their sentiments, but unfortunately they are not the majority, and that's where it gets confusing, because sometimes we're making reactions or doing things based upon that vocal minority, right? And we really should be doing it for the better good. So I just have a concern. $15,000 is a lot of money. We're a small town. I feel as though most people, I'm interacting with, I'm a business guy, right? So I, am not necessarily like all the other council members. I'm interacting typically with, hundreds of people a day, and often we have conversations, and often I'll bring up the conversation to get their opinion on a city matter. So I guess I'm just concerned on the fiscal end. I don't know that this is necessarily the best expenditure of our money to get us the information from the folks we need information from. And so that's just my 2 cents.
Sure. If I'm able to, firstly, thank you for the feedback. If I may answer a couple of points there. So from a population size perspective, even within the state of Washington, we're working with the city of Camas, which is, I think, about 5,000 residents less than you. And we're having tremendous impact in terms of reaching their silent majority residents. As you correctly mentioned, regardless whether it's town hall meetings, surveys, or even people stopping on the street, there's a good chance you might be hearing from those same handful of people over and over again, which is great because they're very passionate members of our community, and they 99 times out of 100 want what's best for the community. Having said that, as you mentioned, the silent majority are less likely to engage in channels that we own. So our Facebook, our city-owned Facebook channels or Twitter handles or town hall meeting minutes. The silent majority, as our data will suggest, it represents about 95% of the discourse, and that's taking place in channels, publicly available channels that aren't owned by the city. So news bulletins, Facebook pages, Facebook groups that aren't owned by the city, but is part of the overall city discourse. And that's what we're doing. We're bringing that in to give you a much more robust view as to what everyone within your community is discussing in real time. And just to share, the key goal of the insights, which we rushed over just a little bit today, the goal of the weekly insight is to break down something very specific for you that the council is interested in, that the mayor, that the city administrator might be interested in real time. It could be the couple of items that we addressed before my presentation today, or it could be about a tsunami warning or anything like that. It could really be about anything that you guys choose as you're choosing. And we will go in, our data expert team will go into the data and dissect it for you, produce insights as to the overall sentiment, where residents are discussing this, and what are going to be the most effective channels, whether it's on channels that you guys own today or external channels, to making sure that you're reaching the right resident group to impact the message accordingly.
Okay. Thank you, Jonathan, and thank you, Councillor Wiesner. We have 3 more hands up here. Councillor Goebel.
Thank you, Mayor. I am excited about this based on the public comments that were read about our utility increase. I think that Sabrina had said in the last meeting that there maybe is some misinformation or people don't necessarily understand the bigger picture of what's going on. So I think this is a great idea. I do have a couple questions. I just want to clarify that, so Zencity will collect data on social media users even if they don't follow the Oak Harbor platforms, or do they have to follow like Oak Harbor's Twitter, Oak Harbor's Instagram, or Oak Harbor's Facebook? That's the first part. So you can answer that one, then I'll go to the next one.
Fantastic. So Zencity, just to share, Zencity goes live within 5 days. And in those 5 days, our team locates and identifies all the relevant channels that's publicly available that would be relevant for Oak Harbor, whether that's within city limits or whether that's just nearby communities, and then we connect it all to the Zencity platform. So they don't necessarily need to be a part of a certain page or a certain group. It's just their discourse within the publicly available sphere on certain channels or certain groups or certain Twitter handles, certain journalists, certain Reddit groups, and then we're pulling that information from those respective groups. So they don't necessarily need to be following Oak Harbor's Facebook page or Twitter handles or even be friends with the council or anything like that.
Okay. Yeah, because I would say I don't even know how many people follow those pages, and it's really hard to get followers for municipal social media. So thank you for answering that question. And then I also just wanted to clarify too, so the main goal, Sabrina, with this information that we're going to be collecting, and I'm going to assume it's going to be presented to us either with the administrator's report or in some way, the findings you have. But the goal basically is to kind of get a handle on misinformation as well as understanding what target or what groups of our community are not being reached from a social media platform with messaging.
Correct. And the other piece is to understand what are the hot topics that are going on in the community. Sometimes we don't hear about something until somebody's had a conversation with somebody else. This would allow us to start getting some of that data ahead of time and knowing, oh, there's a topic that started because of an incident that happened in the community that maybe we weren't aware of, or something happened and we weren't sure how much the community knew about it. So it just fine tunes that data a little more so we can get to the information and be able to provide the appropriate responses.
Cool. And then my last question is from the fiscal standpoint. So we're using CARES funds to pay for it this year, $15,000 if it's approved. What happens if, say, you guys were in the middle of doing some data collection and it's next year and there's no more CARES funds? Do you feel like you'd have the money within your budget or within the budget to pay for it in the years to come when the CARES funds are no longer there?
I worked with Sandra and we added it to part of the technology items for future years. But again, we only did that with the understanding that depending on how it goes in the first year, if we realize this tool doesn't work for us, then that's why we really spent some time working on the contract with Anna and Jonathan, was we wanted to make sure that the city could try this using the CARES fund. And if this is a valuable tool, then we would move forward with using those funds as part of that.
Gotcha. Thank you. Those are all my questions. Thanks for answering them.
Thank you, Councilor Goebel. So then we've got two more. Councilor Servadius.
Thank you. Well, and thank you, I guess, I want to make sure and give credit where credit is due. I support this. This is something that's very intriguing to me. Technology, artificial intelligence, and really keeping a good track on our PR stance as a city. Not so much from the city's perspective that we need to look good, but it's always good if we do, but to know what our citizens are thinking about and saying. So giving thanks and credit to where credit is due. I don't know if this was a marketing effort from Zencity that they called us marketing this product, or Sabrina, or if you and someone on staff reached out, if you've used this product before. But thank you to whoever started this project. I'm very intrigued by it. On the funding issue, I agree with Councilmember Goebel that, you know, if it's viable, it's $2,000-ish a month. So that's, you know, a significant investment. One of the questions that I've always wondered about, I know that we advertise our council agendas. I don't know what we spend per month on some of those advertisements, and some of those advertisements we do in color. If I'm not mistaken, I've seen them actually printed in color, which is not inexpensive. And while we want to let our citizens know when our council meetings are and what's on the agenda, I've often wondered if there aren't programs out there that might be a better use of those dollars. And this could be an example of that, where we redirect some of those dollars to a program like this. So I know that's food for future thought, but that might answer one of those funding questions. And I guess I would just end with, I would hope that it would always be nice if we were in front of the messaging. And that, I think, is our goal as we discuss issues. We know we have something coming up, whether it's a rate increase or a piece of art or a capital project. If we're able to work with the administration and communicate that to our PIO, it would be nice to get out in front of that rather than have a council discussion, vote on something, and then watch it show up in the local news feeds. And then we're dealing with that in the aftermath. So Sabrina, I appreciate you. I know you're doing a good job on this. And I would just encourage you to continue to be as proactive as possible on the messaging. And I guess a sidebar question, I don't know, is it ever appropriate, if you want to take this one on, Sabrina, or even Jonathan, as a communications officer, do we ever respond? There's obviously going to be people that just have misinformation or they have their stance on a particular issue. What is the norm in the communications industry? Do we ever go back and respond to some of these to try and help clarify, or how do you see using some of this data? Would we ever use it in that instance?
So I do respond to some of the Facebook messages we get. I don't respond necessarily to all comments. If it's a clear misunderstanding of the communication item that we posted, then I will respond to that and clarify or provide more detail. What we would be able to use this data for, in my opinion, is putting out something official if we needed to, or seeing the trend that's happening and saying, oh, we need to get on this because there's something that's going on in the community or there's misinformation. Some projects we know about, and so we've built the information, so it's just retooling the message we need to get out to people. And I think all of these differences are why it would be great to have a tool that helps us sort of funnel that data and understand it a little bit better. And that was my goal with when Zencity contacted us, they contacted us and shared their information. And once I saw how other cities were using it, I thought this is a really great opportunity to get on top of the message or ahead of the message before it gets to the point where there's so much misinformation out there. It feels like we're defending the city rather than giving the correct information to the right people.
Thank you. And you just hit the nail on the head. I think right now we're in a little bit of a rebuilding trust mode, as a lot of government is. I mean, people, unfortunately, there's been a lot of contention in politics. And so, you know, people don't necessarily trust at any level government, and maybe that's not even new. So I will support this. I look forward to not only learning what some of those conversations are, but hopefully building a channel and a dialogue that's a little more fluid back and forth between the city and the public, so that they do feel heard, they feel included, and it helps us make better decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Servadius. Good comments there. And move on to Councilor Heisen.
Thank you, Mayor. Excuse me. If I'm excited about this. If this product works the way Mr. Schaefer has described it, this is an absolute dream come true for me. As you know, in my third term on council, one of the things that is consistently frustrating is not only not really hearing anyone's opinions until after a decision is made, when feedback would have been really helpful prior to a decision being made, and also the sentiment that the city, just the city in the royal we sense, isn't listening or doesn't care, et cetera, and nothing could be further from the truth. Being able to, take the temperature of local sentiment is absolutely one of the most valuable things I think we could invest in personally. And so I love this. In fact, Mr. Schaefer, I may contact you later if that's okay, because I'm just fascinated about how all of this works on the back end. But I won't.
Absolutely.
I won't take up everybody's time with that today. I do have a couple of questions. Sabrina touched on this, and I understand that we can, target certain topics. And Sabrina, you touched on the question that was popping up in my head was, if something surfaces that we haven't specifically targeted, if something seems to be trending or rises to the surface of a lot of conversations, will Zencity alert us to the fact that this is a conversation topic that we have not identified?
I'll let Jonathan answer that because he knows the details of how that works. He explained it to me and it sounds really cool, but I'll let him explain.
Thank you, Councillor, for the question. It's another good question. So Zencity has many different functionalities. As mentioned, we break down the data into topics and projects that make sense for the city leadership team. And then, yes, of course, if there are moments or an event that's taking place, Zencity will see a spike in activity, and we can set certain buffers or certain thresholds that if something happens within public safety, like a police-related issue, if it's spiked overnight, it'll be directed to whoever set up that alert, whether that's Sabrina or someone within that team. So you'd be alerted in real time as to what's going on with that particular event.
And I will say one of the concerns, or one of the reasons I was excited about this tool, was that last week I found where somebody had posted on one of the Whidbey Island community pages, what's your interaction like with law enforcement? And by the time I saw it, there were over 244 comments that included a variety of law enforcement agencies on the island. However, had I not been just randomly scrolling through, I wouldn't have been looking for that, so I wouldn't have found it. Having Zencity involved will allow me to have a notification that that conversation is going on. And that's what's important to me. It allows us to know that there are other topics going on that the community is interested about.
I love that. I love everything about that. Thank you. So the second is just a follow-up once this is up and running. If there is a topic that I think of, that I happen to think of and am interested in learning what others are thinking about, Sabrina, would I contact you to suggest that or ask Zencity that? What would that just look like technically?
Yes, it would be myself. So you would give me an email, let me know what you're concerned about, and then we would work with Zencity on getting that set up.
Okay, great. I love it. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Heisen. We now have two more. Councillor Mack.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a concern, I suppose, that all in all, it's a good concept. Yes, I agree with Councilman Servadius. Lately, we've been almost on the defensive, where I would like to see us get out front and get the proper and correct information out there to the public. I am concerned about our seniors, and for those that are on the low tech, I'm wondering if this company can have some insight. Yes, most low-tech people and seniors do at least have a cell, but some don't even have that. I'm thinking more about emergency situations and real important things that would be coming up within the city, that type of thing. So maybe someone can shed some light on that for me. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. If it's okay, I'll take that question. It's another good question. So it's very valid. Like, what if there is someone that's not at all digitally connected, whether it's they have a smart telephone or even a Facebook page or Twitter handle or you name it. The goal of Zencity is to tap into every single possible source that residents might be engaging in. So, of course, there's also local media and social media, but this is why we also encourage tapping into your existing channels. So whether that be town hall meeting minutes, if that's available, or letters, or if someone's called up or a neighborhood watch and there's a phone line on the other end, someone's put in the advice or complaint, we can forward that into Zencity if needed. And then on top of that, we can also leverage talkback radio. So we can use external technology like critical mentions to best understand what residents who are calling up radio stations are discussing, and also print media as well. So any editorials that might be written or anything like that. Once again, there might be, of course, a portion of your residents that might not ever even go that far as well. But Zencity at its core is designed to reach every single possible source and channel that there is available within your community, as much as we possibly can.
Thank you.
So, Mayor Pro Tem Muntz.
Thank you, Mayor. So it said that we would apply for CARES and they would pay for the first year. Is this upfront? And so it would start and end in 2021 then?
Yes, so we're starting it in 2020 through 2021.
Okay. Any other input or questions? Councillor Heisen.
Thank you, Mayor. Just really quick to address Councillor Mack's question about an actual emergency. There is infrastructure in place for alerting residents to actual, legitimate emergencies. Eric Brooks with Island County Emergency Management, they can use the alert system. Like, for example, when there was that bomb threat at the high school, he can literally go into the emergency management alert system, draw a 1 mile radius in an area, and it will automatically ping every mobile phone, every house, every landline, every email address saying stay inside, and so there's infrastructure set up for that kind of thing. And I'd be happy to talk with you more about that in particular, but not really relevant to this conversation, but just so you know, there are logistics set up for keeping people informed in case of emergency. That's all.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other input? Question, Councillor Heisen, still have your hand up?
Oops, my bad, sorry.
It's all right. How's the council wish to proceed? Councillor Servadius.
I was waiting for Councilmember Goebel to jump in here. I think this is her kind of motion, but I'll be happy to make it. Unless you want to speak up, Millie?
I'll make it.
Go for it. Your first motion.
Yeah. Okay. I move to authorize the mayor to sign a 1-year contract with Zencity to provide an exclusive software solution that aggregates, analysis, and analyzes and visualizes localized resident data from publicly available sources.
Second.
So we've got a motion and a second that reads exactly like the recommended action in the packet. Any other input or questions? Seeing none, all in favor, raise your hand. Okay. Any opposed? Okay, that passes 5-1.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you all. Good conversation there. We will now move on to our community partner presentations. Item number A is Arts Commission, placement of Joseph Kinnebrew sculpture collection pieces. And we have, do we have Roderick?
Yes.
Okay, Roderick Gagnon and Cynthia Mason.
Thank you, Mayor.
Welcome.
So the Kinnebrew, the sculpture collection, Kinnebrew collection that that the city purchased last year. On August 20th, the Arts Commission voted unanimously to place that collection at various locations around the city. We do have a presentation to show where those locations are, but it's also in the notes. Then October 12th of this year, I presented this proposal to the Parks Board, and they also voted unanimously to recommend placement of these sculptures at various locations.
Okay, so I assume then since this is being presented in workshop, it will move forward then to a council meeting soon. So are there any questions or input about this from the city council? Mayor Pro Tem Munns.
Thank you, Mayor. Liability or insurance if any of these pieces were to be damaged, because they are on 3 different properties, one of them being private. Are there any concerns or any other legal paperwork that we need to do to make this happen?
Blaine, could you
Yeah.
speak to that?
Yeah, I'll take that one. We will do what we have to do. We'll work with our insurance agency, WCIA. Certainly, the city-owned property is already owned, and so, I've been at another municipality where a sculpture got damaged, and submitted a claim and got it fixed. And so, and I think Grant could speak more to this too. Go ahead, Grant.
Yes, with respect to the piece that would go on the private property, we've been asked to prepare an agreement that would address those very same issues that you raised, Councilmember Munn. So we're in the process of looking at how we would style that to be sure that liability and other similar issues are addressed. So that would be forthcoming in the days to come.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Councilor Wiesner?
Thank you, Mayor. And thanks for that grant. I'm a little concerned, obviously, with the it going on private property. I guess I want to make sure that we address in that document the public access. I mean, this is a public sculpture being paid for by the public. The public needs to be able to have access for it, and the Boys and Girls Club are going to have to realize that that's going to be part of the encumbrance for them. So I'm sure you'll address that in there, but I'm always concerned, when it comes to putting public stuff on private property, that everybody's clear. That's how we all stay friends, right? So.
Excellent point. That's certainly an important component of that agreement.
Okay, thank you for that and your response there too, Grant. Any other questions or input? Okay, seeing none, we'll move then on to our next item. Under Administration Information Technology Update, and it looks like we've got Sabrina back with us. Sabrina?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So this afternoon, I just wanted to share with the mayor and council an update on our information technology managed services. So we have a current contract right now, and I just wanted to give you an update with all that's going on with COVID, what's going on with that. So we currently have a contract with Interpreting Technology. The city contracted for services for the year of 2020. That contract does expire in December 31st of 2020. For reference point, the contractor was selected through a thorough, detailed RFP process, and the contract includes support services of 178 units with software, consulting services, general service hardware, software, program consulting and management, network upgrade, installing 2 servers, city Wi-Fi upgrade in all 7 buildings and 2 parks. It also provides service to assist third-party vendors that we have contracts with. Additionally, we have 2 large projects, including server upgrades, as part of that contract. We recently learned that our contractor, Interpreting Technology, merged with CMTIV Technologies, and we are very excited about this transition. And as part of that, I just want to introduce the new team that we have. They are also on the phone with us. So we have CMTIV Technologies, which includes Scott Hempstead, who is new. He's the Chief Operating Officer for IT Services. Adrian, who we've been working with for a while now, and also Jeffrey, who you see around the office, assisting with computers. We did form a city IT team, and that includes myself, Sandra Place, and Lisa Felix, and we're working together to address the different components as a team. So this team was created because the finance director departed the city, and we moved IT management to the administration department. And the goal of doing that was to provide improved analysis of current projects, the contract, coordination across all departments, plan for the use of CARES funding because we had a lot of requests relating to that, and future scope of work projects. So one thing we really had to talk about when we started meeting was the COVID-19 impacts. The pandemic modified the objectives and delayed some of our current projects because we were addressing all of the needs we had. When COVID-19 hit, we moved several of our employees out of the office to telecommuting. And in doing so, we needed to switch them from CPUs and laptops to Surfaces so that they could improve their telecommuting. We needed to improve VPN access. And then we had some other projects we were working on related to Frontier transitioning to Ziply and some fiber mapping that we were working on at the time. So the additional surfaces that we purchased and the servers that we're using that we purchased were all purchased using CARES funding. And this is the total we're at so far for what we've been doing with that that's been reimbursed for that. So when we started meeting, the big key that I really wanted to understand was where are we at? What are we doing? How do we get on track with just everything that's going on? So we really looked at the projects and deliverables, identified impacts and solutions, tracked tickets, trends from staff, and then also set up regular team meetings. We have weekly meetings to determine steps to meet project plan. So the impacts that we needed to identify were related to some of the tickets we had and some of the projects that were out there. So we found that there were a lot of new projects being asked for or added to the contract that weren't in the contract when we started. We also found out that there were a lot of tickets that people were logging that had relatively simple solutions or tips and tricks that we could provide to staff to reduce some of those tickets. The other thing is that we found out that a lot of staff were logging their tickets as high priority emergency, and maybe not all tickets needed to be an emergency, so we needed to work on prioritizing those together. Then we had the server project update, and so what we did with that project was we moved it from the initial date of early 2020 to late 2020. We're starting that project starting this weekend and going through November, and that's to upgrade to the new servers that we purchased. And as part of that, when we looked at the server location, we're moving the servers to a more secure location. We actually identified where they were located was not as great as it could have been. So as a team, we identified a better location. I worked to find a better storage container and all of that to improve the success of our IT services and keep them in the way that they should be. So with tickets, we found out that we had, as of last week, we had 3,106 tickets that they've worked on this year. And some of those trends, as I was talking about before, they were things like password resets, requests for assistance from companies where they have a service provider. So one of our key things is that sometimes we've purchased hardware or software from a company, and as part of that purchase, we included support services. And what we did was really make sure that we were having the staff member go back to that provider and not rely on interpreting technology or SAMTIV for that. And so that addressed that issue. The other thing is that we've had an increase in hackers or spammers sending emails. So we've been working on some of those issues. Then we have printer issues and of course, automated system alerts. So our solutions were very streamlined, just looking at the trends and identifying ways to solve them. And then getting information out. So in the Leadership Matters e-news that we send out to staff, we've included some articles from IT that include tips, tricks, and resources. So in the weekly team meetings, it's just a matter of tracking all of these different things that are going on. So we track the large projects, we review tickets, we track hardware and software needs with Sandra's help, and then we discuss new project requests and priorities. So it's a real team effort. And then right now, our pending action items that we're working on to complete this current contract are the server migration, which as I said, is planned for November. The final steps are done in December. I'm working with Ziply, formerly Frontier, to address the fiber mapping that we had in a previous contract. And then our future contract scope, we're talking about what are the needs for the next 2 budget years. So our existing contract is about to expire. It includes a 1-year extension for 2021, and the staff recommendation is to extend the contract not only through 2021, but through 2022, so that the contracts line up with our budget cycle, so that we can do better forecasting, cost planning, and budget analysis. And so if council approves that concept, we would be bringing a contract amendment or extension back to council at the November 4th meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sabrina. Council input or questions at this time, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. Takes me a minute to unmute it. So the servers, if I'm not mistaken, were going to be located in the new clean water facility because they had room and it was a very secure building instead of like the fire station. So where are they going to be?
So this is our backup servers, and I'm going to let Adrian or Scott speak to that.
Okay.
Sure. Hi, Mayor Pro Tem. This is Scott Hempstead. I can answer that. So the server platform is going to be located, half of it will be in Clearwater facility, and then the other half is going to be up in City Hall. So there's two different IT closets, one in each of those locations. We'll take the solution and basically split it in half and locate it in each side. And then so what we'll avoid by doing so is we'll create a higher availability solution that we mitigate against, say, a single building outage type of scenario, and the platform will still run and provide services to the city.
Okay, that sounds good, but I know City Hall is not anything near being earthquake proof or structure, whereas the clean water facility is. So I thought that was one ploy to have it there. The other question I have is, what is the speed for downloads and uploads that we have?
I will defer that to Adrian as far as your internet. So what I believe that you're asking is, what are your internet egress speeds for download traffic to the city? Adrian, do we have those details that we can provide?
Yeah, we do. Thank you, Scott. The current speed that is being licensed through Ziply is a 1 gigabit pipe. That is at a maximum. The standardized or sustained speeds are about 100 megabit each way with a 1 gigabit burst.
Okay, if you were to put that in Mbps's, what would that be? How do you convert that? I think a gigabit is 1,000 Mbps's. So
yeah, it's 1,000 megabit. And to get the speed that you might recognize on, say, a computer, you want to divide it by 8 to get like your megabytes per second.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Hi, Mayor Pro Tem. This is Scott Hempstead. I can join in on that one as well. So
All
I
right.
think to Adrian's point, if you have a 1 gig internet connection, the layman's term, if we were to try and saturate that pipe, both inbound and outbound, would be something to the tune of about 100 megabytes per second as far as the traffic that you can push through that pipe.
Okay, thank you. I just was in some other meetings, some federal legislation, and they were saying that minimum we needed to have 100 megabytes per second. So I was just curious what we had. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah, that is exactly what you guys have right now. I also want to make sure it's clear that with the placement of the servers, we are still going to be placing the servers in the clean water facility, but we're having a second set, a backup set in the city itself, in City Hall. So that way, since one of the challenges we've had in the past is something that Sabrina is working on, is with the way that the fiber mapping is, we don't have that clear map and that completed loop that we were expecting and promised from Frontier. And so we basically have kind of like a big curved H right now. And so by having the servers in clean water and City Hall, it gives us kind of both sides of that H. So if one half of it goes down, the other half can still stay at least functioning for the time being, be it power, be it line cut, be it routing, be it whatever. And so the idea is that we have things in two physical different locations that are still connected on the back end via a very fast connection. So that way things stay up and working. And so I completely agree that the clean water is a great place to put things. It's been designed for it. It's locked down. We have cameras there. We're absolutely putting the main stuff there, but then the backup stuff's going to go in the City Hall.
Good idea. Thank you very much for putting that in layman's terms that are simple to understand.
Happy to help.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, seeing none, we will then move on to our next item, which is finance. Mayor's preliminary 2021-2022 budget presentation. At this time, then staff will present these numbers. The material for the budget will be circulated to City Council after this meeting and ask for your input and questions, etc. to be emailed, but there will be several meetings as we move forward to discuss the final city council budget after these are presented. So at this point, I'm going to turn it to, I think, do we have, we certainly have Tally Boyer from our finance department, our accountant, to present these. I think we also have Mike Bailey available and Grant Weed. So at this point, I'll turn it to Grant Weed to kick off this part. Grant?
Thank you, Mayor, and good afternoon again, everyone. I was asked just to kind of help tee this up for council by giving a couple of minute explanation about the respective roles of the city council and city administration in the budget planning and adoption process. You know, the process for adopting a budget, whether it's biennial or annual, is largely set by state law. The budget process is truly a team effort involving the mayor, the city administrator, city council, and staff with input from the public. The process for the council is that it's the budget process is a public policy setting function, and the council sets public policy in basically two major ways. First, by enacting ordinances during the course of the year on the many variety of topics that come before you, and then secondly, by establishing budgetary policies for taxing and spending. The city administration influences and carries out policy of the council through budget implementation and recommendations to the council as to what is needed. So this is the very first step in the process today from that standpoint. The final budget is adopted by the city council. It's your budget. And that adoption of the budget is through enactment of a budget ordinance. The budget ordinance is technically a policy document that gives direction to the city administration for implementation of programs. Part of the budget process is the function of estimating expenditures. Department heads in the finance department prepare expenditure estimates based upon a projection of current trends, a forecast of the effect of new programs, and an estimate of what is needed to pay remaining bills. In terms of reviewing estimates, the mayor and city administrator review the department, the various departments' requests, taking into account council policy objectives and priorities for new, expanded, or reduced programs. It's typically a give and take process out of which a preliminary budget is developed, which, as the mayor indicated, will be forthcoming to you soon. Another important step, of course, is estimating revenues. And so while expenditures are being estimated, the city's finance department looks at and forecasts estimated revenues for the upcoming biennium for you. Two key questions are raised through that process. What factors impact future revenue flows? And what are the estimated level of revenues for the upcoming budget period? When we get further into the process, there's the preparation of the document. The mayor and the city administrator, along with staff, prepares the draft or preliminary budget for council review. As the mayor mentioned, that will be sent out following this meeting. The actual budget document typically contains 4 basic parts: a budget message, a summary schedule of revenues and expenditures, detailed revenue elements, and expenditure details with dollar and workload implications. In terms of the adoption of the budget, which will need to happen not later than December, the mayor, with the assistance of staff, will present the budget to the council and the public for review and adoption. Hearings are held with department heads and with the public to review expenditure requests. And once these hearings are completed, a budget ordinance is prepared and proposed to you as a council for enactment. The ordinance authorizes funding specific expenditures with specific resources. Lastly, in terms of implementation of the budget, with the aid and the assistance of the finance department, the mayor and city administrator's job is to implement the budget that you as a council adopt and provide you as the council with periodic reports that show a comparison of accrued revenues and expenditures to the budget projections and appropriations. The law also requires the city to present a report of remaining expenditures and unexpended balances for each appropriation to you as a council on a quarterly basis. It's important to carefully monitor, of course, these budget results. So that in a nutshell, it sort of describes the process and the relative roles of the council and the administration and staff. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Grant. Before I turn it to Tally and Mike, I want to introduce our brand new finance director. He's with us here today after 2 days and 6 hours. Who's counting, right, David? Please welcome David Goldman to our staff here. Nice to have you, David.
Well, thank you, Mayor, and I really appreciate the offer and working here. And yeah, I'm just learning a lot about our budgets and finances, and I'm working with everybody here. So I'm really looking forward to to a good year, to approval of the budget eventually, and then to really looking into what we're doing here.
Thank you, David. So I'm going to turn it over to Mike and Tally. I think, Mike, did you want to say a few words? Mike Bailey?
Yes, Mayor, and in fact, I have a presentation that will cover a lot of the highlights of the preliminary budget at this point, and then I'll be handling the reins over to Tally as well. So as Grant said, this is the presentation of the mayor's preliminary budget. And with that being the case, let me talk about the things I'm going to provide the overview with respect to the budget. And those things that are in white here are topics I will spend a few minutes on. Those things that are in the orange color, orangish color, are things that are either pretty straightforward in as much as they are carried forward from year to year, haven't changed, or we have already covered them. So I am going to touch on some of what the mayor included in his message. We included a section in the materials you'll be getting that we call highlights that really identify those key points. And hopefully as we go through those, you'll see that that really does sort of characterize what the recommendation and the proposal is. Again, not many changes in the certainly the organizational structure or council policy direction for this budget. The council policy direction for the budget will be identified point by point in the highlights comments. So this just avoids repetition. Financial policies have not been revised recently, so I'm not going to belabor that. The budget process, I'm just going to touch on that for the sake of anyone else who might be following and interested. It does reflect the most recent calendar that the council has seen and reviewed. There are no changes to the most recent calendar, but again, I will highlight it just for the sake of others who might be interested. The overall budget summary itself, sort of the financial aspect, we have spent some time on the major revenues already as a council in September. I will identify in the highlights comments those couple of cases where the preliminary budget does deviate from the numbers that we saw in that previous review. So there are only two, and therefore I won't belabor a repeat of the walkthrough of the revenue sources. And lastly, I'll tee up the long-term capital plan overview that will be included in the packet as well. So as I mentioned, starting with the mayor's message, obviously, and as I'm looking at budgets across the country, they almost always start with this notion of a COVID context. Not only are these uncertain times in terms of the impact it's already had on the economy, we continue to see now, even now, the numbers again increasing, countries in Europe shutting down, things of that sort. So it is certainly a challenge to put together a 2-year spending plan in the context of this COVID pandemic, and we want to recognize that right off of the bat. As I mentioned, the budget was formulated with a fair amount of care to be responsive to the priorities that the council developed earlier in the year. And council took a day of your time to provide this important foundation, and we wanted to honor that certainly in our work. On the whole, for the city, the budget is $215.2 million over the biennium. Remember, that's 2 years. For those folks out there that see these numbers and wonder about their magnitude, again, remember it's over 2 years. That has actually a decrease of $12.6 million from the previous biennium in its most recent amended form. The budget does recommend the use of some fund balance to balance in some cases. This has been consistent in the past with the city of Oak Harbor. Various cities approach this different ways. Blaine and I have had this conversation. I think he's still trying to get used to the way the city of Oak Harbor does it. But this budget treats fund balances in a very similar fashion to the way they've been treated in past budgets. And so while in this COVID context, many communities are having to pull against fund balances in order to maintain a basic level of service. We've done that to some degree, but it's, again, very consistent with past policy on this issue. Having done that, the policy level targets for each of the fund balances and all the funds are met with 3 exceptions. 2 of the 3 we've talked about at some length as we've reviewed the utility rate setting topic. That's the water utility and the wastewater utility, and council is very familiar with the way the rates and the anticipated revenues and expenditures interact with fund balances in those accounts. The third one is, again, probably fairly familiar, in as much as the Senior Service Center Fund is severely impacted with the decline and I think even cessation of travel and some of the other services they offer. And so the Senior Service Fund will be utilizing fund balance to maintain basic services while the pandemic occurs. More on that in just a minute. Lastly, the mayor in his message does thank those who've worked hard to create this recommendation for the council and the community to consider, and identifies certainly the work of all those involved, but 2 that have really stepped up and beyond what's probably appropriate for their roles, and that's been Tally Boyer and Jessica in the finance department. So that's the summary of the mayor's message. I mentioned the highlights section, and I'll walk through these, and you'll see at the top it's highlights -1. There's several pages of these, so hopefully that'll help us kind of keep track of where we are. First of all, as I alluded to earlier, the council's priorities are the first thing that you'll run across in the highlights section. And in the council's priorities, I identified economic development as one of those things that they wanted to see some progress on, hopefully, in this upcoming budget. And the recommendation is to conduct a study on the economic development needs and opportunities that exist in the community, and that study would inform future investments in this area so that they would be able to be most advantageous to those goals that reflect the economic development area. The budget will include a number of options, and Tally will go through those with you in a few moments. Those options are things that were not able to be included in the mayor's recommended preliminary budget, but things that we know that council has expressed an interest in the past. And therefore, we wanted to provide you the information so that as you deliberate on this budget, you have that data in order to consider if you wanted to make some additional changes and implement some of these options. One option is for the council to consider a staff position to address economic development needs in the year 2022, the second year of the biennium. There are capital projects in the budget that address some of the infrastructure needs in the Goldie Road industrial areas. I understand it's an industrial park area. The second council priority was with respect to regional parks. There is planning money in the budget for the Harbor Heights Regional Park in 2021, and we were able to include construction resources to get some of that work started in 2022. Third, it should say third, effective priority is effective transportation. Certainly the Transportation Benefit District projects are now incorporated as part of this budget, and the TBD project plan is the blueprint for what projects we wanted to include. We wanted to remain true to the project plan as it was presented to the community and garnered their support for the Transportation Benefit District in the first place. Another priority was city facilities. And we have been able to include some improvements for city facilities, a variety of various facilities. And again, we'll describe those as we go through the content. Tally has more detail on some of these topics a little later on. In the meantime, there's a recognition that we need to spend some time looking at the facilities of the city as a whole in order to make sure we make the right investments at the right place at the right time. And that priorities aren't a matter of reacting, but more being proactive. So that's something that's on the work plan in the coming year. The Windjammer Park was an additional council priority, and funds are included to begin planning on phase 2 of the improvements at the Windjammer Park. So I believe, let's see, workforce housing, I was going to say that wraps it up, but no, workforce housing is an additional council priority and is along with development permitting. And the housing action plan, planning work that's going on right now will inform best next steps. And so that's kind of, wait and see where that takes us kind of mode. But secondly, there is an option, as I've described the options earlier, presented for the council to consider that would acquire software to assist in improving permitting processing and resources they have for that activity. Again, I say it's an option, meaning it's not in the funded budget, but information about what would be needed to include it should council decide to would be provided at the end of Tally's presentation. Moving next, beyond council priorities and into personnel changes, this budget does include and continue to incorporate the 2 police employees who were added to the last biennium's budget during the middle part of the biennium. In fact, at that point, the funds for this upcoming biennium weren't identified, and in order to make that work, there had to be some other adjustments, and primarily the police department, I want to give them credit, found most of those resources that were needed to be able to retain those police employees. I mentioned the challenges in the Senior Services Fund, and the decreased activity results in the recommendation incorporated in this budget to decrease the employee count by 1 in the Senior Services Fund in 2021. However, the money is in the budget to restore that position in 2022 with the expectation that the revenues would also recover in 2022 as well as those activities return back to normal. There are no other changes included in the recommended budget, but there are numerous considerations for council in the options section. I mentioned earlier that the revenue updates were largely consistent with the presentation we gave in September. 2 exceptions. One exception is in the property tax area. Tally spent time with the Island County assessor and utilizing their processes and their paperwork, learned that they had anticipated higher property tax collection in the 2021 than we had, and of course that would then be the floor. for the 2022 property tax estimate as well. So both were increased after that conversation. And I just want to use this as an opportunity to remind everyone that because the implicit price deflator, according to state law, is less than 1%, and a community the size of Oak Harbor would require finding a substantial need to increase the annual property tax levy up to 1% above what was collected this past year. And that has been incorporated into this budget. That's the recommendation. Other general fund revenues remain the same. And as I mentioned, the Senior Services Fund revenues are one where after further analysis and thought, we've decided to reduce those forecasted expectations in 2021 due to the ongoing pandemic effect on their services. We do continue to illustrate 2022 forecasts as was presented to the council in September. So presuming recovery from the pandemic by 2022 enables senior services programming to return to normal as well. I wanted to point out that all of the discussion about the utilities and utility revenues and the rate study analysis helped a great deal in informing that aspect of this budget. And certainly the utility revenues are consistent with the rate study and the adopted rates that the council just recently adopted. In the debt service area, this budget would comply with all the debt obligations, and beyond that with all the related obligations, such as the call for reserve funds, the call for debt service coverage, and things of that nature. So this is a sound budget from the standpoint of meeting all of the city's obligations, both direct and indirect, with respect to debt service. Real estate excise tax funds are utilized in various projects throughout the capital improvement plan and streets, parks, and some of the city facilities as well, both real estate excise tax number 1 and number 2. One of the points in the capital projects, which you'll again hear more about as time goes along, is that it does complete the work on the Portland Loop. And as I mentioned already, the utility fund budgeting is consistent with the rate modeling that we've spent a fair amount of time on. The Marina Fund continues to sustain operation even through the pandemic. It's changed a bit, the nature of the activity in the Marina Fund, but the level of activity, though different, is certainly continues to be good. And as a result, that budget is typically consistent with what you would expect, notwithstanding the pandemic. It does include a number of capital amenities, some of these amenities provided for through grant funds as well. The internal service funds are those funds that provide service back to other city funds, and therefore they would sustain normal operations in support of those other city funds. And so that's kind of a routine part of this budget. There's nothing significant going on there. As I mentioned options before, there is an option to set aside additional funding to replace fire equipment. Again, that is not in this budget. We'll talk more about that in just a little bit. There has been some discussion about improvements in the fire service, more of a full-time type fire program and things of that nature. That recommendation is not included in this proposed preliminary budget. Again, there is additional information provided around some of these elements, but really staff is recommending that be a subject and a discussion all of its own. It would propose to have that soon after the first of the year. Moving on to the calendar, as I mentioned, I just wanted to illustrate the calendar and have it available for others if they're interested in following it. There are no changes made to the calendar that was shared most recently with the City Council. So a number of workshops and other discussions, of course, tends to always follow the presentation of the preliminary budget, a couple of public hearings, and then final consideration for the adoption of the budget. Is preliminary set for December 1st. In terms of just a high-level overview of the budget, I made mention before in terms of the kind of the bottom line numbers, 215.2 million versus 227.8 in the last biennium. Here's kind of a snapshot look at how the three different major funds of the city, the largest funds of the city, the general fund, the water fund, and the wastewater fund, kind of how they compare from one year to the next. And so you can kind of see from year to year and biennium to biennium kind of what's happening in these different funds, and just one way to look at the overall impact. In the general fund, that budget is $33.7 million. And in the prior biennium, it was also $33.7 million. So there's no change in the total recommended preliminary budget from the prior biennium to this current biennium in terms of the overall amount to be spent. Of course, a great deal of things are going on beneath that surface, but at the surface level, it's essentially the same. And there's a bit of a breakdown in terms of where those dollars go to provide service to the community. The long-term capital plan overview, there will be a great deal of detail provided for your scrutiny on the long-term capital plan. Again, staff has been great in supporting Jessica, and she's done an excellent job of managing this project and pulling all this information together for your review. I'm very impressed, and I'm sure the council is very thankful for all of the work that's gone into this. Again, the overall plan for the biennium is around $31 million. And again, you can see the breakdown of where those dollars go in the pie chart. Over the 6-year plan, it's about $57 million. And as I said, there's a lot of information for you to familiarize yourself with the projects that are included in that plan. And again, it's a very high quality work product. That's the highlights and the overview of the preliminary budget. And moving on, I will stop screen sharing and let Tally tell you a little bit more about some of the numbers and kind of what's going on in a sort of a deeper level. Thank you for your time, and it's been my pleasure working with the city on this project. Again, I think the council and the community should be proud and pleased with what's been able to they put into this in these times when many people are working under difficult circumstances. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Good afternoon, Council and Mayor. I'm Tally Boyer, an accountant with the Finance Department. I will be presenting the next section of the Mayor's preliminary 2021-2022 budget. The focus of this portion of the presentation will be on operating expenditures. Capital projects and detailed department budgets will be discussed next month. I would like to start with a few items of note for the budget on a citywide basis. This budget does not include a cost of living adjustment for any group of employees, but at the end of the presentation, I have included several different options for COLAs for the council's consideration. The cost of benefits are budgeted at 40% of the cost of salaries. Interfund charges consist of both direct and indirect charges for services from one fund to another, and contributions for replacements for vehicles, equipment, and technology. The indirect charges for services were budgeted at the same rate in 2019 because they are based on many drivers. At the end of the year, all indirect charges are trued up to actual costs and could be significantly different than budgeted. What is beginning fund balance? Beginning fund balance is an estimation of the current resources available to supplement budgeted revenues. We start with cash and add current assets, such as grant monies that might be due to us. Then we subtract current liabilities, such as custodial accounts. Then we add anticipated revenues and subtract anticipated expenditures, and that gives us the available balance. We are looking to identify items that will influence cash in the short-term future. So what is budgeted beginning fund balance? From the available fund balance, we subtract the operating reserves of 16.67% in governmental funds and 25% in enterprise funds. Additionally, some funds may have legal requirements or specific items earmarked as reserve, so those are also subtracted, and this is the amount of budgeted fund balance. So what is unbudgeted fund balance? This is equal to the operating reserves plus any other items that are legally required or earmarked to be set aside. The general fund is the main operating fund of the city. It includes fire and police services, legal, finance, planning, parks, administration, and other general activities. Taxes are predominantly the revenue source for the general fund. In 2021, we have additional transfers in. Those are coming from realized excise tax, also known as REIT funds, for small capital projects. The personnel expenditures, as Mike mentioned, account for the major expense in this fund. The increase in 2021 of transfers out is due to the $400,000 transfer of excess stabilization funds to the wastewater fund to buy down the utility rate. And as depicted in the table here, this second to last line, change in fund balance, this budget uses $2 million of fund balance, $2 million of budgeted fund balance. In 2021, general fund budget is $17.4 million and $16.3 million in 2022. Public safety utilizes over half of the general fund budget, police representing 40%, and fire about 17% of the total budget. You'll notice a decrease in the mayor's department and an increase in the administration department. That is due from moving the PIO officer out of the mayor's department and into the administration department. In the general governmental fund, the 2021 budget is less than the 2020 budget, as the 2020 budget includes the CARES small business grant. And 2021 is higher than 2022 because 2021 includes that $400,000 transfer to the wastewater fund that we spoke about. In the police department, as Mike mentioned, we are filling the 2 new officers that were not previously budgeted. There is also an ICOM contribution included in the fire department, in the police department's budget, and an increase in their professional services for housing inmates. In the parks department, we were successfully able to fund their security cameras with the proceeds from the Sleeper Road property sales, as these monies were earmarked for park improvement. So in the general fund, we have an unbudgeted fund balance of $4.7 million. $257,000 is for the general obligation bond contingency, $500,000 for a capital facility reserve, $985,000 of excess stabilization cash, $212,000 of Sleeper Road proceeds, and $2.7 million of operating reserves. Both the Sleeper Road proceeds and the excess stabilization cash have been reduced by the planned use in this budget cycle. The Streets Fund derives its revenue from state shared gasoline tax revenues and CAPRON funds. CAPRON funds are state shared revenues comprised of gasoline tax and motor vehicle licensing fees. The Street Fund records all the operating expenses related to the repairs and maintenance of the city streets. Interfund charges make up the majority of expenditures in this fund. Interfund charges are not a true reduction of cash. They represent the cost of services from one department or fund to another. In the personnel budget, This includes some staff reclassification. And in the transfers out in 2021 and 2022, this is greatly reduced as we reduce the annual shoreline restoration contribution from $75,000 to $25,000 a year, and the annual streets improvements from $400,000 to $30,000 per year. This budget uses $841,000 of its budgeted fund balance. The unbudgeted fund balance consists of operating reserves in the amount of $281,700. Senior Services Fund receives participant fees, grant revenue, and contributions from the General Fund and Island County for expenditures associated with providing services and activities for the senior citizens of Oak Harbor and Island County. The 2021 budget does not anticipate any travel, as we are unsure of how COVID will affect this program. The 2021 transfer in includes REAP funding to assist with the roof repair, as well as the annual operating transfer from the general fund. As Mike also mentioned, the 2021 personnel budget does have the reduction of one staff member as we expect travel to be reduced, with the anticipation that in 2022, as travel increases, we will be able to refund that position. This fund is using $45,000 of its fund balance in this biennium. The unbudgeted fund balance in the Senior Service Fund is equal to $400,000 for an endowment that was left to the center.
40,000.
The Water Fund accounts for the operations of the city-owned water utility. The Water Department maintains 4 storage tanks, approximately 105 miles of water mains, and 3 booster pumps. The distribution system serves the city of Oak Harbor and supplies water to the U.S. Naval Air Station, Whidbey Island. Revenues are derived mostly from user fees. The 2021 personnel budget included the retirement of one longtime employee. So you'll notice that reduction in 2021. Operating and maintenance costs are the most significant expense to the water fund, with the cost of items for resale representing $2 million of the $3.4 million, as the city buys its water from the city of Anacortes. These transfers out are for large capital projects. The staffing also includes some reclassification of employees. The 2021 budget, offset by the 2022 gain in fund balance, shows a usage of $2.1 million of budgeted fund balance. The unbudgeted fund balance in the operating reserves of $1.4 million. The wastewater fund accounts for the operations of the city-owned sanitary sewer utility. The wastewater department maintains approximately 70 miles of sanitary sewer mains and 11 remote lift stations. Revenues are mainly derived from user fees. The 2021 transfer in is from the stabilization cash for the utility rates. The operating expense in 2021 includes $200,000 for lagoon repairs and $450,000 for removal of the lagoon biosolids. At $7 million, the cost of debt service on the newly constructed clean water facility accounts for over half of the expense in this fund, which is not unusual in a large utility. The transfers out are for large capital projects. With the increase in fund balance in 2022, offsetting the decrease in 2021. This biennium uses $647,000 of budgeted fund balance. The unbudgeted fund balance in the wastewater fund is $3 million for operating reserves. The solid waste fund accounts for the operations of the city-owned solid waste utility. The solid waste utility provides solid waste, recycling, and yard waste services, with revenues mainly derived from user fees. Operating expense make up the majority of the solid waste budget. These budget's revenues cover the budgeted expenditures, so this fund uses none of its budgeted fund balance. The unbudgeted fund balance in the solid waste fund is $951,000 for operating reserves. The storm drain fund accounts for the operations of the city-owned storm drain utility. The storm drain utility consists of 10 city-owned detention facilities and maintains approximately 49 miles of storm drain pipe, roadside ditches, and bioswales. Revenues are mainly derived from user fees. Interfund charges and transfers out are the main expense in this fund, followed by personnel. Use of fund balance for the storm drain during this budget cycle is $722,000. The unbudgeted fund balance in the storm drain fund is operating reserves in the amount of $663,000. The marina fund accounts for the operations of the city-owned marina. This full-service marina has moorage berths, dry storage sheds, and dry landing storage. Other services provided are temporary moorage, electricity, and fuel. Revenues are mainly derived from user fees. The marina's budget continues to support the same level of service as prior years and does not use its budgeted fund balance. Operating and maintenance expenses are the main expense, followed by personnel. The unbudgeted fund balance in the marina, I apologize, there's actually an error on this slide. $257,000 is for their bond reserve, with the remaining being for their operating reserve. The equipment repair fund accounts for the motor pool operations of the city. Revenues are derived from interfund charges to other funds and departments for fuels and equipment. The $60,000 transfer in 2021 is to help pay for the shop floor repair, and that comes from the shop facility fund. The increase in the operating expense include the repair of that floor and the cost of fuel. This budget uses $146,000 of its budgeted fund balance. The unbudgeted fund balance in the equipment repair fund is for operating reserves in the amount of $158,000. The equipment replacement fund accumulates monies for future purchases of large pieces of equipment and vehicles for the city. Revenues for this and the following two replacement funds consist of monthly contributions by funds and departments, and the expenditures are for the replacements of vehicles and equipment. The facility replacement fund accumulates monies for the future. The facility replacement fund accumulates monies for future repairs to facilities. Currently, the only two funds making contributions are the shop facility fund and the wastewater fund. There are no anticipated expenditures during this budget. The technology replacement fund accumulates money for the future purchases of technology and software. Software licensing is the main expense in this fund. The shop facility fund serves three purposes. First, it accounts for the cost of operating the Public Works Facility campus and supervision of the various Public Works divisions. Each division that is housed at the facility is charged space rent and an allocation for supervisory costs. Secondly, it accounts for the engineering department. And lastly, charges out for the labor pool to the other funds that use these services. The majority of the revenues are interfund charges, and as I mentioned earlier, those were budgeted at the same level as 2019 and will be trued up to actuals. Personnel costs are down due to the retirement of a longtime employee. The operating costs in 2020 are elevated as that budget includes the expenses related to our CARES grants. Interfund charges are down in 2021 and 2022 as it was determined that vehicle contribution balances were adequate to cover replacement costs, therefore contributions were reduced. Staffing includes some reclassifications in the engineering division. The use of fund balance in 2021 is offset by the increase in 2022, and this fund actually increases its fund balance by $88,000. Although this fund has an operating budget, there's zero unbudgeted fund balance in this fund. That is consistent with past practices as it is an internal service fund and will recoup its costs through allocations. The following slides will detail options that are not included in the budget, but may be included at Council's request if available funding is identified. The first option is for administration. They would like to add an economic development specialist in 2022. With the additional equipment required to set up that position, the cost would be just over $100,000. The Development Services Department would like to implement a new permitting software in 2021 at a cost of $100,000. In the General Governmental Department, we've budgeted a donation to the Oak Harbor Main Street organization. If Council chooses not to fund that donation, it would be a savings to the general fund of $23,750. Additionally, we have budgeted $9,000 per year for the Homeless Coalition. If Council chooses to increase that to $20,000, that would cost an additional $11,000 per year. In accordance with past practice, the fire department budget does not include vehicle contributions for 3 fire trucks. The annual cost to set aside funds to replace these vehicles would be $232,000. The alternative is to bond for each of the vehicles as it is needed to be replaced. The fire department is also seeking a grant to cover the cost of the extrication tools. The Parks Department would like to add an additional park specialist at a cost of approximately $65,000 per year. If Council chooses all of these options, the effect on the general fund budget would be an additional $454,000 in 2021 and $376,000 in 2022. In the Streets Fund, they would like to purchase a Leeboy paver. If I'm not mistaken, this is a used paver at a cost of $120,000 in 2021. There's a potential for some savings in the Water Fund by eliminating the vacant water specialist position at a savings of approximately $65,000 per year. Engineering would like to eliminate their administrative assistant and add a GIS technician locator in 2021. In 2022, they would like to add 2 more positions, a development review engineer and a design engineering technician. Those new positions would require a new truck and office equipment. We would hold off buying the truck for the 2021 position until 2022. That would increase the shop budget by $2,000 in 2021 and $289,000 in 2022. As I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, this budget does not include a cost of living adjustment for any of the employee groups, union or non-represented. I have provided 4 different options for COLAs. The 2022 amounts represent the compounding effect of the increase. There will be a handout of this presentation distributed after the meeting. We are currently requesting that questions be submitted to Julie, the city clerk, at jlindsay@oakharbor.org by November 5th. Thank you.
So thank you, staff, Tally, Mike, and Grant, for all of your help on this. The only very quick number I wanted to talk about is Tally mentioned the unbudgeted fund balance. The amount on the slide was right. I think she said 400,000 for the senior services fund, and it is a $40,000 endowment as listed in your package. So with
Thank you,
that,
Mayor.
with that, you're going to get a lot of numbers going forward, and you're going to get to spend some additional hours on this, believe me. But if you've got questions, as Julie just mentioned, or as Tally mentioned, please feel free to send those to us by email and anytime moving forward. So, Councillor Servadius.
Thank you, Mayor. Are we not, having a discussion on this topic right now?
No, there was no plan to at this point.
So this is a council workshop and we're discussing every item on here and you're taking input from the council, but you're not taking input on this item. It just seems a little off.
Well, this is the way we did it last 2 years ago. So you get the numbers, plenty of time to look at it and ask us questions. If you want to ask a particular question right now, that's fine.
I have some general questions. One of them, I guess, I'll save my comments for the council member comments then, if that's how we're doing this. But I think Tally said that street improvements, did I hear her right? We're taking down by 400,000, that line item. I was trying to take a lot of notes real quick, since I don't have it in the packet to refer to. Was that a correct statement on the street improvement fund?
That is correct.
Well,
it's usually.
Okay, I'll save my comments till the end of the meeting for council member comments. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, and we do have different meetings like the mayor's talking about, that where we're talking about the workshops, and the council will, the departments will submit their particular area in detail as part of the agenda item. Most of them on the operating will be on the 18th of November meeting.
Yes, but we'll have some council input at the end of this meeting also. So, and that would be fine too. Okay, then we will move on to our next item on the agenda, which is Development Services. Our Development Services Director, David Kuhl, Comprehensive Plan Amendments Update.
Good afternoon, Council. Today we should have staff members here available to talk a little bit about the comprehensive plan as well as the Shoreline Master Program. CAC is available, and I'm checking to see if Dennis is online. There's CAC, and Dennis is there as well. And then I'll pick up on the last one, which is efficiency review of city building code standards for council review.
So,
good evening, good afternoon, members of the council, mayor. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. So we're here to just touch point with the City Council on the comprehensive plan amendments moving forward. This has been a standard topic for City Council discussion at the workshop, so we thought we'll keep you updated as we go into December with the capital improvements plan and the land use changes. Those are the two items that are tracking for the 2020 comprehensive plan amendments. The housing element is being updated with the housing action plan, and that will spill over to next year. We are currently tracking that process with consultants that are helping us with that effort. We actually have a stakeholder meeting at the end of this month, actually tomorrow, which will be the second meeting. And we'll be talking with them and coming back to City Council, potentially in the November and December meeting, and providing more updates and inputs on that process. So the capital improvements plan is in a very conceptual form. I'll go ahead and share my screen that has one of the attachments that was sent along with the packets. Let's see if I can make that happen here. Right. So this is the draft plan. I apologize for its size. It was a PDF format, trying to shrink a very big spreadsheet into a legible format. Challenging at this time, but I'm glad it's a PDF, so council can zoom in and see some of the projects that are moving forward. I just want to have a disclaimer here, since we're going through the budget process and you probably heard a lot of the information that's being presented. We're working on the budget, and so a lot of the numbers are still moving around. And as we discussed with the council, I'm sure there'll be other changes that we'll have to incorporate. But one of the main things that we wanted to share with you at this meeting is just some of the project status and what's tracking into the CIP for the next 6 years. And so the column that to pay attention to is more here on the project status, where we have some of the new projects that are being proposed over the next 6 years. And that's kind of what we wanted the council to highlight to the council. The numbers will change. These are this is a spreadsheet that has been extracted out of our budget sheet, so it's missing information on some of the projects, because capital improvements plan tracks projects that are greater than $50,000. So most of the projects that are in your budget, other smaller projects that's less than 50,000, is not reflected on this capital improvement sheet. So just to highlight a few things that are tracking in the CIP currently in a conceptual form. You can see there are some fire station improvements that have been included in the fire department for the parking lot, and some carpeting that's deteriorating. We have, I think earlier in this year, we talked to City Council about approaching the RTPO for some grant money for street projects. The two projects that were proposed was Midway Boulevard and the active transportation plan. Those are the projects that are tracking in the IRTPO. We have a potential for change here. As you can see, the active transportation plan is scheduled for the year 2023. However, in some recent discussions, there's a possibility to push it up to 2021. And so we're working on that with the county, and that could likely change as well. And then we have some projects added to the water fund. You're familiar with some of these projects, the SR20 Campbell Road roundabout, and the need to move a water line is a project that we need to accommodate. So we added that, and some of the other projects that are tracking from our plan that will help us improve the system has also been added, along with some improvements along the Goldie Road area where some improvements are needed. Similarly for the wastewater treatment plant or the wastewater fund, we have some new projects that have been added as well that are tracking for the CIP and likely options to consider. So that's just a brief snapshot of the capital improvements plan that's tracking. And this will be, as we get to December, we'll be in sync with our budget. At least the first 2 years will be. The remaining years are just planning years and scheduling years. But we will make sure we get this information from finance. So eventually, when we go through the budget discussion and get ready to adopt our capital improvements plan, these numbers will jive with our budget, and we'll incorporate that spreadsheet into our capital improvements plan. Before I jump into providing an update on the Harbor Heights land use, I will quit sharing my screen and entertain any questions regarding this.
Okay, any questions at this point regarding the comp plan amendments? Councilor Servadius.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, CAC. CAC, as always, appreciate the detail. That spreadsheet, there's a little more, and I appreciate its thoroughness, there's a little more streamlined version of that we used to use. I don't know if it's still circulating. I forgot to say earlier, welcome, Mr. Goldman. But it's a spreadsheet that I've used many times when I'm out talking to the public and they inquire about a project where it breaks it down by the amount allocated and the possible funding for each of the next 2, 4, 6 years. Does that still exist? Do you guys utilize that? If not, maybe I can get together with Mr. Goldman and we can see if we can find it and recreate it. It's super helpful for council. Do you know if that's something you've got out there anywhere?
Yes, I do. Because it's a work in progress.
It's basically that spreadsheet just distilled down.
So this is the total finance spreadsheet that we use for the capital improvements plan. When we take it into the plan, we break down some of these numbers and make it into a simpler table, into a Word format. Is that the table that you're thinking about?
If I was smart enough to share my screen, I'd show it to you, but I'll get together with you offline. But that's a great reference right there, and it's very helpful for us to understand, but also to be able to communicate when somebody asks about an upcoming project. So I'll work with you and talk to Mr. Goldman offline that if we could have that available and sent back out to council, I think it would help educate us and make us better communicators and liaisons to the public. Thanks.
Absolutely, we can do that.
Councilor Wiesner.
Thank you, Mayor, and then thank you, CAC. Fantastic detail. I really appreciate the explanation. One thing I don't quite understand, what is the total CIP column meaning?
Yeah, so the total CIP column, if I can go back, and I will apologize for my, I'm going to share my screen again. The total CIP dollars here are supposed to be the total of all these dollar amounts to the right side. Now, my apology here, this column did not get populated when I made the PDF for the council packet. I had to cut some of these portions out in order to do the PDF, and for some reason I lost the formulas and didn't add the table. But if the original spreadsheet, and which is what we use for our budget, does have the total CIP and the dollar amounts here, and this will be a little clearly articulated when we come up with more finalized documents and numbers for your next meeting.
That's fine. It makes total sense, CAC. It's just obviously the numbers weren't adding up, and I wanted to make sure I understood. fully the chart. And one question involving the sewer, the reuse effluent water system park irrigation. Now, I know we had talked about that. We put in the purple lines. We did everything, and I thought we were like plug and play there. What are we having to do there?
I'll defer that to our engineers in terms because most of the projects are generated in the departments that get into the fund. I will refer that question to engineering if anybody in engineering is here and can provide that information.
Can I interrupt here just to kind of give you, we're doing a parallel process here with the CAP and the budget process. And on
Sure.
November 4th, we're going to go into detail in a workshop on the project. And so we'll have the opportunity to discuss a lot of those things and have a more update spreadsheet.
Okay.
I think with letting you know what's going on, he went ahead and integrated that. And I think after the budget process, CAC, you will integrate what we do in the budget process. And the budget process is going to be the main driver of this, and then he'll reconcile it and correlate that into the planning process.
All right, fair enough.
Mr. Councilman Weismer, this is Jim Bridges. If I could just quickly, really everything is plumbed into the treatment plant right now. Essentially all it is a connection into the park system that's already existing for it as well. So the park system is ready to take the effluent water, and the system is already ready to go in the building. We just need to make the connection.
Okay, yeah, and you and I can get together maybe a little later and talk a little more about that so I can kind of understand the cost involved. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Mack.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, CAC and Development Services for the spreadsheet. I too is in with sync with Councilman Servadius. I had made a couple phone calls here this morning to Administrator Oborn and as well as Service Department. The spreadsheet a little bit more detailed, such as a line item on the side, as you had shown there, CAC, would be really helpful, where we can get everything spread out. Even under magnification, this is pretty small. I know we can get hard copies and we can blow this up. But again, more detailed, like Councilman Servadius was suggesting. I do realize the numbers are changing. I do have questions on some of those, but we will save those for an additional council meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Mack. Councillor Wiesner, any other questions? Okay, just checking. I see your hand up there still, so, okay. Great, then we will, seeing no other questions, we will move on to Shoreline Master Program update. What's that?
CAC, did you have another piece of your presentation?
Oh, yes. Thank you. Thank you, Dennis, for reminding me. I just wanted to give a quick update on the Harbor Heights land use change that we're doing for the council. We have sent out a postcard to people that live around Harbor Heights because we're going through that land use change, informing them about the change and asking for comments. Thanks to Sabrina, we also had it on online and Facebook, and we also had a questionnaire that people are actually responding to, and we have support for changing that land use from industrial to parkland. So we're getting some responses on that. We are also getting some emails regarding that development. There are some concerns from neighbors in terms of how the edge treatments will be handled. Will there be buffers? Will there be fences? Those are details that are going to be probably resolved as we get into the conceptual design and the phasing design. A little too early in the process to determine that. There were also some concerns about encampments and homelessness and vacant population walking through there. We have alerted our code enforcement officer and the police department on these things. And so trying to stay on top of those type of issues and keeping the neighbors engaged in the process. So we'll go through the land use change with the comprehensive plan amendment. A lot of people are curious and want to be involved in the actual park planning. We're engaging them with or keeping the consultants informed of that interest. And so when we go through the design concepts for the master plan, we can, when we have public input opportunities, we can incorporate these people into the planning process and take their comments as well. So that is progressing well, and that'll come forward to the city council as well at the December meeting. Any questions on that?
Doesn't look like it. Thanks, CAC.
Thank you.
Okay, then we'll move on to the Shoreline Master Program update. Is that you, Mr. Lefebvre?
It is, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Members of the council, good afternoon. My presentation will be very brief. As you know, we are getting fairly close to having a draft review document for the periodic review of the Shoreline Master Program. As authorized by council last year, we are working fairly early in this review process with the Department of Ecology. So what I thought would be a good tool to put together would be a timeline to show yourselves, the Planning Commission, and our public what the final steps in this process will be. So I am going to share my screen and show you how to navigate to, oh goodness, there it is. I'm going to have to pull up the web page for us, which I don't see on my screen. Well, I'm kind of stuck here without having to.
There we go.
There we go. Okay, this is our home page. What we will do is go to departments, go into development services.
We're not seeing it, Dennis.
You're not seeing it? Oh,
Yeah.
let me share my screen then here. I'll minimize
It's
and
sharing.
share.
It's sharing. You just need to open up the home screen. So I think if you open up another screen, it'll probably bounce to it. You just have Ring Central on.
Okay, I'm still not pulling that up.
I know
but
you did a good last night, Plan Commission.
yeah, no, I got messed up on this one though. Well, I can verbally walk you through this, which would probably be easier.
Oop, we may have lost him.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dennis, we
Yeah, I
think
just
you're sharing the wrong monitor.
I'm just messed up here. Huh? No, I'm not doing it here. Let me just get on yours.
Would you like me to, I can.
Yeah, go ahead. Yep.
You don't already have it open, correct?
No, I thought it did, but
So we just need to, here we go. Now you can do your navigating.
is that sharing?
Yes. You see this guy here, you're sharing that.
So this is all shared. Okay, can you all see this? The home page for us?
Homepage, yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay. I'm sorry about that. We're all in a learning process, I'm afraid. But anyways, the tab under departments will have development services. And then under that, we'll have planning and development, which will also have a section for the Shoreline Master Program review, periodic review. And within that page at the bottom, we've added a proposed work plan for project completion. So obviously, I will not go through all of these steps in the interest of time, but if you have an opportunity to take a look at that, that shows what the anticipated steps will be to complete this project in coordination with the Department of Ecology, and also identifying where our public participation opportunities will be, the Planning Commission review and the City Council review. So with that technical glitch on my part, it turned into a medium presentation. So if you would like this in a different format, please email me. I can get that to you. So with that, concludes my presentation.
Okay. Any input or questions? Not seeing any. Okay. We will move on to efficiency review of city building code standards for council review. So, not sure which, David, which, have you got this one, David?
We're not hearing you
Yes,
yet.
sir.
Okay, there you go.
Thank you. Today, I'd like to set up the goal is to resolve any challenges we may have within the planning and development arena and improve the communication with the development and non-development community. Sometimes there are interpretations that are made in the process that result in customers being unhappy with the decision. And anytime you are regulating private property, people tend to get upset. Zoning is naturally that way. So these are laws that we enforce, and people just naturally tend to get upset. So it takes every bit of due diligence we have and every bit of patience to explain the rules, but sometimes there's just misunderstandings. So oftentimes it's because the applicant does not understand the code, and we spend a lot of time trying to explain the code to them. Sometimes there's misunderstanding of what the process is, and so we'll spend a lot of time explaining what the process is. We'll use spreadsheets and we'll use flowcharts to explain process. Sometimes we'll have a failure of communication. Sometimes it's on our part. Oftentimes it's because we might explain a process to an applicant, and they'll explain it to somebody else on their development team, but they'll misinterpret it. And so something doesn't get built correctly or done correctly in the field. So there's a breakdown. This happens everywhere in development. So this is not unique to us here. So this does happen. Other things that happen in this business, sometimes properties are very difficult to develop, leading to lengthy and multiple reviews. For instance, there's a lot of hillsides that are left to develop currently in Oak Harbor. There are wetlands that you have to develop, and those are difficult. So they take more time to review. So it just takes a lot more patience on the part of developers as well as applicants who might not totally understand the process. People who are a little more experienced at it, they understand it can take more time. Sometimes there's private engineering isn't that good, and we've experienced some of that. There's one particular firm that's causing some challenges that maybe we'll give them comments and they don't read all the comments, and so they'll turn the next set of reviews back in and they won't have looked at all the comments and resubmitted all of our comments, and so we have to go back through them again, and it's wasted a lot of time. So it leads to more time-consuming reviews and causes everybody frustration. So these are just some of the problems we face in development, but it's not all doom and gloom. We've got some real successful projects here in town. I'd like to highlight a couple of those so you know about them. One of them is the Howards Point PRD plat that's being done right now. It's being done by Bill Massey. This project has gone very quickly, and they've done one thing, and that's follow all the rules. That really helps when people follow the rules. We explained the process to them and they followed it. Another project that's been successful so far has been the McKinney Place PRD. And that just got through the hearing examiner this week. And that's gone quickly because the developer, also Bill Massey, followed the direction given by staff, and the product will turn out well because there's just not been conflict between what we've asked him to do and what's going to happen on the ground. So the term efficiency has been used in the request, I think, by council. And we think that probably means the overall process rather than building code. Could just be a use of terms. Building code itself is not something that we really control. The ICC establishes building code. That was adopted from 2015, so that's really not something we change. We make interpretations, but we really don't think that's probably the problem. Sometimes it's just process and communication that becomes a problem. So one thing I think that you've already started here, long before I got here, was the lean study. The lean study, I think, is something that we're trying to follow. And it determined that there was probably a need for a central permitting system improvement. And what that would do is would help coordinate permits and would help track projects between departments a little better. Currently, we use a spreadsheet, and spreadsheets are great. I mean, it's a good way to do it with an Excel spreadsheet. This way, with a centralized permitting system, everybody in the city could see where you are with a project, just with the ability to have a sign on. So you can see when a project comes in, when it leaves, how long the developer has it, and so on and so forth, so that it's not just one person having one spreadsheet on one PC, and you having to go through one person in the city to find out what's happening with the project, which is what we have currently. I mean, Lisa does a great job what she does, but she's limited in tools. So that's really what we're really hoping with the centralized permitting system. To illustrate that, I have a project here, Whidbey Dental, that's just about ready to break ground, but you can see where the project came in as pre-application in March of 2019. And we worked with them back and forth just on a pre-application stage. They didn't actually apply until November of 2019. So it went back and forth from March until November 19 before they actually applied. And then it went back out to them and it didn't come back until July. So they had it longer than we had it in review, but unfortunately, sometimes when developers have these projects, they claim that, well, we started in March of 2019 and we still don't have a permit. Well, in reality, they've had the project in their hands longer than we've had it. So it's unfortunate, but sometimes people don't understand that what developers are really telling them is not a complete story. So just want to let you know that there's more to the story than meets the eye sometimes. So the lean study is one thing I think will help us a lot, as well as coordinating with this development review team, which has already been started before I got here. And we're continuing to work with Jim Bridges and the development committee to continue to help coordinate our projects. And I think that's continuing to build momentum. My hope is that we continue to work on that. I believe that the streamlining will help as we continue to work on tracking these projects electronically with a permitting system, as well as continuing to help each other to be successful as different departments. Now, there's one other thing I can think that would probably help us all, and that would be the addition of an in-house engineer for the Public Works Department, but also for the Development Services Department. And I think it would be helpful for us over here to have if an engineer was to be hired, just to have the engineer over here in this department for at least a day, 1 day a week, to help physically coordinate projects and work together on these things so that they turn around and we communicate a little bit better. So the development review committee team works really well, but sometimes physically it helps to be in each other's presence. And I think that would probably help. So obviously that's before you in a budget related discussion. And we certainly hope that we'll take a close look at that and certainly support Public Works Department in their request because I think that would probably help our department as well. So I've laid the foundation here for a couple of things we're asking for. One is a permitting system, and one is for an engineer for the Public Works Department. And we're available for any questions you may have regarding permitting and any issues you have regarding questions you're getting from the development community. So thank you for your attention, and I'll certainly open it up to you.
Okay, thank you, David, for catching us up there some, and turn to council. I see Councilor Servadius.
Thank you. First and foremost, since I've not had a chance to meet you face to face, is it Cole or Cool?
Cool.
Okay, perfect. I've known both, and they were both spelled the same way. I've known a Cole and a Cool. So, Mr. Cool, thank you. I was the one that made this motion originally, and while I may have used, I think, the wording at the time of building efficiency of our building processes, it was really as much development processes, and not just in development, maybe in the engineering review side or development services, but it's really the whole pipeline. My experience on council, probably one of the easiest stones to throw from the public standpoint has been the city is not easy to do business with. And that often falls in the realm of building, permitting, development, which now is predominantly your department. And whether that's true or not, like I said, that's a fairly easy stone to throw, probably in most municipalities. And so when I made that motion back, kind of lose track of time of COVID, probably June-ish timeframe, it was just the hopes, and I think I named the individuals at the time, Mr. Kamak, Mr. Bridges, Ms. Rosen, that those people would come together in those two departments and really take a good hard look at, and not saying you're not doing this all the time, but take an extra hard look at how do we service the public better. For me, this is one area, development, that I'm pretty passionate about, as I think some of my peers are, and it's economic development to me. It's not only building our community to be more efficient, a smarter community and all of that, but it's also just pure economic development and trying to figure out how to do that as efficiently and as responsibly as possible. So, I appreciate your words and the process as it's moving forward. I know this position's new to you, but if you have any questions, or maybe I'll find time to either give you a phone call or stop by and try and see you. But I appreciate the work that you're doing on it, and all of the staff members across the board working collaboratively to try and find ways to not only improve processes if that's available, but also to continue those communications to the public. I know that can be challenging. I've used as a reference, just so you'll know, I sat in on a meeting once. It was a pre-app meeting, and staff did an excellent job of providing comments, and the individual that was sitting there representing the project never put pen to paper. And I found that fairly intriguing because there was a lot of comments that were offered up, and that person, maybe they were great at internalizing that, but they never put a pen to paper to walk back out, as you said, to their development team. So that was kind of interesting. So please keep up the good work, and look forward to meeting you face to face. Thank you.
Likewise, thank you.
Councilor Mack.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Mr. Cool, for the presentation and your straightforward comments. I want you to continue to work with staff. I know staff, everybody has their own little piece to the puzzle, but the more everybody can work together here and to keep these projects moving, the more it benefits all the applicants and the community as well. So thank you again, sir.
Councilor Wiesner.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, Mr. Cool, appreciate your comments. And I guess you get the feeling from council that the message we're trying to send you is we're here to help your department figure out whatever it needs to do to make things just work better for everybody, including the department, right? And I think one of the deals is nomenclature and understanding nomenclature. I think I speak for myself. Part of our concern isn't building code issues, but development code issues, right? We've had occasions where staff has come to council and said part of the delay in a project or part of this circling off to the side, which we came out of the lean process, them indicating we kind of had this fairly straightforward process until something got over here and got into a circle, always tended to come back to our development code and the attempt to interpret the development code, because it's hard to keep development codes up to current ways of building and designing and current state regulations and et cetera. So I guess what we're just saying is, as you're going through this process and as you're working on some of these projects coming in, if there's something in development code also that needs to be corrected or in most cases more well-defined, right? Because by having a well-defined set of codes, granted, we take away some of our lateral movement, but at the same time, we don't find ourselves over here on the side in a big circle all trying to figure out what it means, right? So we're here to support that, and certainly we appreciate your thoughtful insight coming into this new, fresh set of eyes, right? And that's important for us to hear that from that fresh set of eyes. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no others, we'll move on to our next item. And that's under Marina, auction of abandoned vessels due to non-payment of charges. And I think we have our harbor master, Chris Sublett.
Hi, Mayor, City Council members. I'm here today to present to you an item that you're going to see on an upcoming consent agenda for a City Council meeting. We have two vessels where the owners have not made payment and the accounts are now severely past due. We've sent all the proper notices and letters to these folks and haven't received any responses. RCW 53.08.320 and Oak Harbor Municipal Code authorize the city to secure these vessels for non-payment of charges. Following all the proper notices to the owner, 90 additional days without payment, and subsequent city council action, we're authorized to conduct a sale of the vessel to recover the costs. So really, this is just laying the groundwork for an upcoming city council meeting where we'll ask for authorization to auction off these vessels. A pretty straightforward thing. Be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay. Councilor Heisman.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to go slightly backwards, but on the same topic. If you followed up on the last auction, I apologize that I missed that info, but I'm curious, you recently did an auction. I'm wondering do you recall how successful we were at recovering those late fees?
We weren't very successful at all. We had 4 vessels to sell. We sold 2 of them. We're moving forward to sell the other 2s to as well. But typically when this happens, the person's walked away from it. I can tell you that usually these boats are not super nice boats. They're typically fixer-uppers. They're typically boats that we ask to be removed from the marina. So there's little or no value to them. The greatest value to us is to get it out of the marina so that it's no longer a liability or taking up a slip. So, I mean, the most we've ever sold a boat for was about $5,000, and that was a fairly nice boat. But typically they're in the $100 range with us. So recovering costs is very difficult. Ultimately, the account ends up in collections.
That's interesting. Thank you. Yeah, I went and checked out the last batch, and yeah, you're right. Most of them had been pretty neglected, and I think one owed a pretty substantial amount of money, and I wasn't sure just what the track record was there. So, but yeah, I mean, if we're at capacity and you've got a waiting list for mortgage, then it makes sense to get them out of there so we can get some actual income rolling in. So thank you for that explanation. I appreciate it.
Sure, no problem.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Seeing no other questions, then we'll move on to our next item of business, under senior services, actually. Liz Lang, our Administrator of Senior Services, has been involved with our library board, and this topic is discontinuation of library board. Liz? Is she with us? Should we just move it? Or,
I'll take it on the fly here.
Okay,
So
okay.
I'll give
City
you.
Administrator?
Yeah, she did a nice overview here, like the mayor introduced with her. She has been our liaison with the library board, attending the meetings. We did have their meeting with them. We had discussions with the library board. This has kind of been an evolution throughout the library district, to the Snow Isle Library with the dwindling of boards, and she mentions in here how the number that we have and how it's dwindled over the years. This was on the Snow Isle Library's suggestion to us to go ahead and dissolve this library board. It's an ordinance of the city that produces library board. It was kind of useful in the transition from the 1966 or 1996 when we had a city library, and then we transferred to the Snow Isle Library. But now we have other groups. We have a real active trustees group that people can contact with and have contact with, and we also have a real active Friends of the Library. So it just became evident that this library board is really not needed anymore. So we're recommending, and we'll bring to the council an ordinance dissolving this board. And I'll answer any questions you have.
Blaine, can you move your microphone or something back? I get such an echo throughout this whole meeting when you speak. Something's not quite right, please. Thank you.
Probably my mask too. I can pull it off. Is that better?
Doesn't sound like
okay.
much.
All right. All right.
So there will be more to come on that. It'll come at a future council meeting. So if there are questions, let us know. At this point, then, we will move on to the city administrator report.
All right, I'll try my mask again here to support. Given the long meeting, I'm just going to highlight one thing just on the budget calendar. I want to make sure the council knows that the November 18th meeting, starting at 2, is planned to be a long meeting. So we're planning on budgeting at least 2 hours and then an hour lunch or hour dinner probably, and then 2 hours again. So certainly allocate your time accordingly so that we can have all the council members there. And I know staff is fully aware of that, and they will be there too. So that'll be a great opportunity for us to dive in very detailed to the process. And then also, I mentioned earlier, the November 4th, we'll talk about the capital projects and be able to dive into that in a special workshop meeting. So with that, I'll take any questions you have on any of the items, and I certainly thank, as always, my staff and department heads for helping put this item together and to keep the council informed.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Oborn, on your city legislation priorities from AWC, they were reviewing those today and they've made some changes, but until AWC votes on it, I will be able to get copies of that as soon as they have their meeting in December. It's I think second Friday or first Friday. I will get that to you, but it will look different from what you have here. Some of it is familiar, but some of it is similar, will be different. They've added some items to it.
Well, thank you for that update. I know we traditionally utilize them as one of the tools in deciding what we want to do on the local level, so it's very helpful.
Okay, so before we do have an executive session, but before we do that, let's go to city council comments. Other business, whatever. Councilor Servadius.
Thank you, Mayor. Just comments that will refer back predominantly to the, I guess it's just budget process comments in general. Once again, welcome, Mr. Goldman. Have not had a chance to meet you either. I know you're brand new here. A theme that I saw, or I heard, I guess, in the presentation there was a whole bunch of beginning fund balance being used. And one of the statements was that this is consistent with past years. And while I recall in the 19 and 20 budget cycle, we did use beginning fund balance to make that budget balance. I was very concerned, and I made the statement at that time that while this is not a fun process, the 21-22 budget will definitely not be a fun process, and that's where we're at. And I guess I just want to let you know, Mayor, Mr. Oborn, that I would ask you to go back. I'm going to have a hard time approving a budget, and I'll have to wait to see it. But if it's predominantly funded by, and there were a few funds that weren't, Marina, there was a facilities one, there were several funds that weren't, but when I see the general fund, it looked like being drawn down to zero and using all of beginning fund balance. To me, that's very alarming. That is a trend that started in this current budget cycle that we're in the current budget. But that can't be consistent with past years. That term doesn't make any sense, because if you're constantly using beginning fund balance, either you're way under budgeting and ending up with beginning fund balance that you can use. But that was a little inconsistent statement there that alarmed me. And something else that stood out, I guess one request I'll make and one last thing that stood out. There was a comment in there about some needs by the fire department that are not in the budget, but we'll discuss them next year. And I would like more, I guess I could email you, Mr. Oborn, but I would like some information on that, because if we've drawn the general fund down to, if we've used all of the beginning fund balance, I'm not sure what will fund whatever those needs might be. And I guess the request I would make, it might be for Ms. Boyer or whomever, Mr. Goldman, the new finance director. If there's a way, you guys work in the numbers all day long and you see the subtle changes here and there. And I know in the past when a change was made in a fund, there were little highlights made. So if there's a way to summarize, and Tally, you were doing this when you were making your comments, you would summarize the predominant changes that were being made in that fund. That is very helpful to me. It's hopefully helpful to my peers as well. So if you could, as we move forward, if there's a significant change, and I'm not talking about the little changes, but if there's a significant change being made in a fund, please highlight that or make a note of it so that we can be aware of it. It's a lot of information for us to digest in a very small period of time. And once again, I'm just going to be paying close attention. I get really nervous and I'll look at it as percentages. If I see a fund being balanced by beginning fund balance, and that's a large percentage of that math, to me, that's not sustainable. And so I would say that we probably need to look at other ways to balance that fund rather than just gobbling up beginning fund balance, because we truly don't know what the next 2 years look like. And I hope I'm wrong, but I'm probably going to be a little more bearish personally as far as the economic outlook. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor Servadius. Those are good comments. We've got some interesting times ahead, I think, in this budget process. Believe me, I appreciate those. So thank you, Councilor Heisen.
Oh, I don't have a comment. I was just giving Joel a thumbs up.
Okay. Anyone else for council comments or other business? Okay, seeing none, the council will now meet in executive session for the purpose of discussing a real estate matter pursuant to RCW 423110, Section 1, and then it's items II, B, and C. Those factors that bear upon price include property location, condition, possible uses, and economic development. The executive session is anticipated to last for a period of 30 minutes. Action may or may not be taken upon return to the open session. Executive sessions are not open to the public. So we'll go into executive session at this time. 30 minutes.
The recording has stopped.
You're good, Mayor.
Okay. Thank you. At this time, I'd like to reconvene the special workshop meeting. We went into executive session at 4:55, and that executive session is completed. We made no decisions at that point. I'd like to say that I believe there's no further business for our special meeting. It is Wednesday, October 28th, and it's about 5:15. At this point, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. Or I guess I'll just say it's adjourned. How's that? Think I can do that without a motion. So we'll call this special meeting adjourned. Thank you very much, council. Appreciate it.
Thank you.